thinking about how 2017 was such an amazing year for me, and I wanted 2018 to be even better. So I thought, what better way to start off the year than to make a closer connection with my audience? And maybe, just maybe, be able to help somebody make their life better in 2018 the way that my life was so much better in 2017. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about why I have a service dog. Now, I'm uploading this to my pet channel, but it's going to be less about my dog and actually more about me and the struggles that I've dealt with. But first, I do want to make a disclaimer. Now, don't even bother writing any negative comments on this video, because I am going to be screening all the comments that come through, and I will delete and block anybody that wants to inflict their ignorance on the rest of us. Now, the reason I'm doing this, it's not for me. It's actually for anybody else out there that might be, going through the same thing and reading the comments, and I don't want them to be discouraged or, just for them to have any negative comments there. I want this to be a safe place for everybody, basically. So anything like that is just going to be deleted. I want people to be able to have a conversation in the comments, and a conversation that's going to help everybody. And it doesn't have to be that every comment has to be positive, just that no making fun, or no saying something mean, or something that's just very ignorant of other people's illnesses. And the reason I'm doing that is because there was a time in my life where that would have hurt me. And I think I've even probably had instances like that. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't happen here on this video. So I have a service dog for anxiety and depression. Caspian's full title would be a psychiatric service dog. I also use Caspian for mobility support, but that I'm going to talk about towards the end of the video. I've dealt with anxiety and depression probably most of my life, but I was not diagnosed until I was older. As an adult now, and looking back on my memories, I can say that I probably had an anxiety attacks before the age of 10. But I don't know exactly when. I couldn't say exactly at what point, because back then I wouldn't have understood what I was going through, so I couldn't say exactly when it started. My anxiety disorder is genetic and first manifested as anxiety attacks. However, because I was already predisposed to that, due to situations in life, I developed panic attacks, which is different, and I'm going to get to explaining all of that in the video. But my first panic attack I had at the age of 12, and that one I can tell you exactly, when it happened. And that I experienced when I needed to go through grief counseling, and I was very young and not being able to deal with everything that was going on in my life at the time. Now, I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was 19 or 20, and by that time I had already started to understand what I was going through and what I was experiencing, but it took a lot longer to learn how to cope with it. When I was 21 or 22, I was diagnosed with depression, and it took a lot longer for me to accept that. I was in denial about it for a long time. I think I had been lying to everyone else and myself for a very long time about my anxiety and depression, and that I had started to believe it, and I didn't accept that I had depression. The anxiety for me was, I guess, I couldn't ignore it as easily as the depression. I was extremely depressed during high school, but I was very good at hiding it. I was very good at hiding being depressed and my anxiety, and no one guessed. I'm sure if you talk to anybody who I was friends with, or teachers, or just anybody at the time, I'm sure that they wouldn't believe that I was very depressed at the time. I was a straight A student. I was president of everything. I was ranked number 5 out of a class of hundreds of students. I traveled the country competing in business, arts, even math. I had a part-time job, tons of after-school activities. I went out with friends every weekend. I worked as a tech in high school, fixing teachers' computers. Everyone knew my name. I was popular, and I was voted the best representative of my school by all of the teachers. And I'm not telling you all of this to brag about accomplishments. I'm telling you this so that you can understand that somebody who's very depressed is probably not what you imagine. And all of those things I was good at, and I did, and I had a lot of accomplishments, and I won just, tons of awards for all kinds of things, from writing to just speeches and just all kinds of things, art. And so it's really important to understand that depression doesn't look a certain way. And I think that, to me, was why I took such a long time to understand that I was depressed, is because my life was too perfect in a way. I was so good at making everyone else believe that my life was perfect. And inside, that's not how I felt. I didn't feel good. And the worst part about it was that my life was close to perfect. Like, there wasn't anything that I needed. There wasn't anything that, I was missing. But I was extremely depressed. And if nobody else could see that, nobody else knew that. I believed that I was too successful to be depressed. So it took me a very long time to understand that what I had was called high functioning depression. And that's when somebody looks like they have their life completely together, everything's just falling into place, and yet they're struggling emotionally, and they feel they feel sad all the time. So to me, my life was too good for me to be depressed. And I think that's one of the worst things about depression, is that sometimes, maybe even most of the time, you don't have a reason to be depressed. And depression's not about having to have a reason. It's just you are depressed. And it's like, cancer. You don't choose to have cancer. And it's the same way with depression. You don't choose to have depression. And when you have depression, it's the same thing as when you're physically ill, you can't just choose to feel better. And with depression, you can't just magically choose to be happy. That's just not the way that it works. And it took me a long time to understand that. And I think it's something that our society has a very hard time understanding, is that a depressed person has to be somebody who's struggling with life and has things that are, just not going right for them. And that's not what depression is. I think that you can definitely have depression because of life situations that are happening, but that doesn't mean that somebody who has, everything put together, it can't have depression. And because it's all in your head. That's why it's an illness. It's not something that you have control over. Now, going back and talking about anxiety, I hid my anxiety and panic attacks for many years. My panic attacks were infrequent, and I was able to manage it without it really showing the effect on my life, at least I think. But by the time I was about 18, I was not able to. My panic attacks became much more frequent, and I didn't have control over them anymore. If I ever really did, which I probably didn't. But around that time, I just was not able to deal with anything, and I struggled with everything, and it just kind of all came undone. I basically just couldn't function, and my panic attacks became very frequent, and I actually developed a fear of having a panic attack, which basically guaranteed that I was going to have a panic attack. And that's actually there's actually a term for that, because it's a syndrome. I just can never remember what it is, but that was something that I developed because I was so worried all the time that I was going to have a panic attack, that stress caused me to have a panic attack. Around that time is when I met my husband, and as you guys know, we dated for a very short amount of time and got engaged and moved in together, and I got married when I was 19, which was the best decision of my life. And he started helping me learn how to cope and manage my illness and understand it as well. And it was like everything that I had been holding together just came undone, and I exploded, and it got very, very bad before it got better. I just could not function. I could not do normal day activities. I wasn't able to do anything by myself. It affected my life in such a huge way. I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I started just relying on Jaime so much for everything, and it was not a good way to live. So Jaime suggested that I get a service dog, and at the time I didn't know anything about service dogs. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know if I would qualify for one because I looked completely normal. And we started, looking into it, researching, learning more about it, learning about service dogs, and learning about my illness and how I could cope. It was around this time that I actually found Zoella's video about her anxiety and panic attacks, and that video helped me so much. It was the first time in my life that I didn't feel like I was alone in what I was dealing with and what I was going through. Suddenly, I realized that there were other people like me, other people that were going through the same thing and experiencing the same thing. And it makes such a difference. It makes such a difference to know that you're not alone. And that's why I hope that this video helps somebody. So if you're watching this, I hope that it helps you learn more about what it is that you're going through, what you're experiencing. And anybody that thinks that they're too successful to be depressed, I hope this helps you understand that depression is not just for somebody who is going through something hard in their life. So I think that it would be a success if just one person that watches this video feels a little less alone. Now, I got a service dog when I was 21, and I started trying to do more activities and just, going out more, going out with Jaime, and trying to be more confident. At the time, I was not driving at all. I just couldn't. And I think it was about a year after having Caspian that I started going out by myself. And I started actually driving. And at first it was just short distances, nowhere too far, but it was something. And that made me more confident. And Caspian just gave me so much independence. And now I'm at the point in my life where I can do and go wherever I want, like do whatever I want. So it was such a huge improvement to my life. Caspian is trained to alert me to panic attacks, and that was one of the biggest ones for me, is that I felt like I wasn't going to be ambushed by them and humiliated. He helps stop panic attacks and anxiety attacks by using pressure points and stimulation. He helps me maneuver crowds and responds to my moods by helping distract me. And if I start zoning out, he'll actually bring me back to what's going on, bring my attention to what's actually happening. He can also help me with personal space and shielding me, since I really hate for people to touch me. So it's just some of what he does, and he's made a huge impact on my life. And it wasn't always easy. Friends and family were very confused and didn't understand why I had a service dog, were sometimes very annoyed by it. Some of them just completely avoided doing anything with me, going anywhere with me, because I had my dog with me. And others even accused me of having a fake service dog. Some of them were just couldn't understand what was going on. And then some of my family didn't get it, but they supported me and they never made it an issue, which to me, that's what I appreciated the most. One of the reasons that I chose to have a service dog was because I did not want to be medicated. So I'm not medicated at all for my anxiety and depression. I am not good on medication. I have a lot of problems taking medication and often have very bad side effects and just really struggle with that. So I didn't want to be on medication because I didn't want to be sicker than I was, and I wanted to be able to be myself. So even though it was hard dealing with all of this without medication, I just had to. And with Caspian and natural remedies, I've been able to stay off of medication completely. It's actually been really great. Now, the depression was something I struggled with the most, I think, because there was so much good stuff going on in my life. I didn't feel like I had the right to be depressed. I felt like there was so much positive things in my life that it was wrong of me to not be happy all the time. And that made me even more depressed. I would have trouble sleeping to the point where I remember one time I was actually crying physical tears because I was so upset and frustrated by how tired I was. I was just so exhausted and I could not sleep. And then other times I would sleep way too much. So I actually went through a whole sleep study thing where they did help me learn how to manage that. But of course there were still other symptoms of depression that I do still deal with now as well. Some days I lose all of my motivation and it seems like any little task is just really hard to do. And I get so exhausted. And it seems like I just am not going to be able to have any energy. Like it's just going to be impossible to get the energy in order to complete just very simple tasks, just everyday life. But I can say that my pets actually really help me with this. Because I own so many animals, I have this huge commitment to them. And it doesn't matter how I feel, I still have to provide for them because their lives depend on me. And it's because of that I can't just let my depression keep me in bed or keep me from doing something. I have to take care of my pets. And so I'll feel just completely no motivation. I can't do anything. Like, it's just really, really hard. But I try because I love my pets and I need to provide for them. So I will separate everything into small tasks and just get through them one at a time. And sometimes I'll even write it all down. And it feels so good when I can go through those tasks. Like, okay, I did that. And it makes me feel good. It makes me like, I did that. I got through it. I can do another one. And like that, I can just go through the whole day actually, completing a normal day routine. And I think that helps me from falling into a great state of depression where I wouldn't get out of bed, because it would be so much easier at times when I feel like that to just stay in bed. But I can't, and I don't let myself. But it's hard. And it feels good when it's like, okay, maybe today wasn't great, but I did these things. I can look back and be like, okay, I did a few things. And I think that helps. I think that makes you feel a little bit better. And besides that, just once I get into that routine and I am completing each task, I'm there involved with the animals, providing them with what they need. And they actually start distracting me. And sometimes I'll start feeling a lot better without even realizing it. Because, can't really be sad around a goat, right? But just my animals, I think, really bring me that happiness and that peace to my life when I am feeling very, very depressed and when I can't find my motivation. A very, very important part of my life and managing my depression is actually going to the gym. Now, this one can be very hard for me because I am not an athletic person, and personally, I really don't like exercising. But it helps me manage my depression in a way that nothing ever has, not even the animals. Because from going to the gym, I get that motivation, like I wake up with it. So with the animals, I don't have it, but I have to force myself, and I kind of find it with them. With going to the gym, if I, keep up with a regular schedule, I will actually start feeling better, like from, when I wake up. So sometimes I'm not even happy about going to the gym, but it is so important for my mental health. And I got a comment recently of somebody saying something like, don't let someone tell you that you have to go to the gym. Don't feel like, you have to. And it's like, nobody's doing this to me. This is all me. It's my decision. Nobody tells me that I need to go to the gym or anything like that. This is something that I push myself to do. And it's not because I'm not happy with myself or trying to change myself, really, because I've never been happier with, my body. I've never loved my body more than I do at this point in my life. And I'm very happy with my image. So going to the gym, my motivation is actually my mental health. And that's what keeps me going. And then the other stuff is kind of extra because, of course, exercise is great for your body and makes you look good. And so that's something that I also am wanting to work towards. But I go because I just would be in such a worse state for my mental health if I didn't do that. It was really hard at times, and sometimes still is, to go to the gym because with depression, sometimes I just felt like I was way too exhausted to be able to have the energy that I needed for my workout. But not going would actually make me feel more depressed because, I wasn't exercising and I guess getting all those things in your brain that you need. So it would, if I didn't go, it would turn into this vicious cycle of like, I'm too depressed and unmotivated and no energy to go to the gym, to I don't go and now I'm more depressed and less motivated, and just turn into this huge vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard at times. And then of course, after a break and going back, it's again very, very hard to get into the routine of it because it does take a while before it actually kicks in. You can't expect to go to the gym 3 or 4 times and then suddenly start feeling better. It actually kind of takes a while for you to get to where you need to be. At least for me, it did. Now, I still have anxiety attacks somewhat frequent, and I think that's just how my brain is. I think there's only so much I can do. Before, I used to not be able to separate how my anxiety made me feel and how I really felt, and it controlled my life. So if you aren't familiar with anxiety attacks, I'm gonna kind of try to explain it so that you can understand it more. They are episodes of incredible fear and anticipation for something bad to happen. Now, when this happens, logic is pretty much useless and your brain can make you believe some pretty crazy stuff. So for example, mine were mostly at night, and one of them was I woke up because I was scratching my ear, and then I had an anxiety attack that I had an ear infection and it was going to go to my brain and I was going to die. So Jaime wakes up to me crying and shoving Neosporin onto my ear because you know how Neosporin helps with brain infections. And he very calmly, helped me calm down and go back to sleep, which I don't know how someone wakes up to something like that and not laugh. I laugh about it now. At the time, I was very serious, and it was, something that I was really freaked out by because you just can't think logically. But now I can look at it, think about it, and realize how stupid it was. Now, other times I would wake up because I was convinced that my guinea pigs were going to die because they didn't get enough vegetables. Now, they get their veggies every day, but again, your anxiety doesn't let you think about what's actually going on. And so I would have to actually get up and go get them more vegetables in order for me to feel better to go back to sleep. So it was just like nonsense like that. That's what anxiety is basically, is most of the time it's just nonsense that doesn't actually make sense when you think about it. I could feel very confident about my decisions, but then once I got an anxiety attack, I would just question everything that I did. Panic attacks are a little different, so I'm going to try to explain panic attacks in case you aren't familiar with them. Now, for anxiety attacks, I feel like it's kind of like a little story or a scenario as to what's going on and why you need to be freaked out. With panic attacks, it's not like that. It's an overwhelming sense of fear and impending doom. It's like you're about to die, sometimes with agonizing pain as well. At least that's what I experienced when I really started having a bad one. And then also just you feel like you can't breathe, you feel like you're gonna die, you feel like you're in immediate danger. For me, my brain flips to the fight or flight kind of mode, and I just sometimes can't even realize what's going on around me. You don't really worry about something in particular. You just, like, for me, it just kind of goes blank, and it's just fear and pain and like you're gonna die for no reason either, really. I start hyperventilating and crying and sometimes don't even know what's around me. And it's times like these that your brain can actually flip to PTSD modes. And PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. It has nothing to do with military. A lot of people that are in the military who've served or are still serving do have PTSD. But it doesn't have to do with war. It's post-traumatic stress. So it's just a trauma that you went through in your life that you're still struggling with. So it's not just somebody who's been to war. That's something that could give you PTSD. But I want to make that clear because sometimes people think that you have to be a veteran to have PTSD, but basically anybody can. Now, a big difference between panic attacks and anxiety attacks is the length of time. An anxiety attack can go on for hours or more. A panic attack at the most really lasts about 20 minutes unless you have repetitive back-to-back panic attacks, and then it can seem like longer. But they're generally going to be shorter and over with soon. One of the things that sucks about panic attacks is that you usually make a scene because it's so much more intense and overwhelming. So all of that can be very humiliating, and then people will try to tell you that everything's okay. And usually when someone's having a panic attack or even an anxiety attack, they know that everything's okay. And so that just kind of makes it worse. It actually makes you freak out more because you're like, yes, I know there's nothing wrong. And that causes you to have more stress and just have, an even worse episode. So that's one of the things that really sucks about it. So that's one of the things that it's actually nice to have a dog for, is like, hey, let's go freak out at home. And it's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Now at this point in my life, my anxiety attacks are a lot easier for me to manage and deal with. I understand what's going on, and I try to just ignore the silly, dumb thoughts that my brain is making up. So I will try to stick with my decisions that I've made before I was feeling anxious, and just try to distract myself while I'm going through an anxiety attack, kind of just waiting for it to be over. And I guess that's why I've passed, 1,500 levels of Candy Crush. So there's just different things that I do to try to distract myself and not concentrate so much on the anxiety that I'm having. And I no longer allow myself to fall for the crazy scenarios that my brain comes up with. So if I think I'm dying of some horrible illness, I'll just kind of laugh it off. And just in the last year, I've become so much better at coping with my illness. And Jaime has helped me. He helped me learn how to do it. And now I feel like I'm doing it by myself. My panic attacks were something that I would have at least, a few times a week. Now, within the last year, I could probably count on one hand how many panic attacks I had. So it's a huge difference. My depression is something that I am still learning how to manage and cope with, but it's only been about the last year that I've really accepted that I have depression. I did not accept the diagnosis at first. I kept saying that it wasn't right, that I didn't have that. But now I have come to understand that, and it has made my life a lot easier to understand what is going on and to accept the fact that there's a reason why I'm feeling a certain way. So that's really helped me, and I think that that's the first step. The first step is acceptance, and then I can start learning how to cope with it better. And I'm confident that I will be able to, because I've learned how to cope with my anxiety disorders so good. It's I've worked really hard at it, and I feel like I've gotten a lot better. Now, I mentioned that I use Caspian for mobility support, which he does do for anxiety and panic attacks, because sometimes it makes you feel dizzy or unstable. But I actually trained him myself to help me with a different mobility issue that I was having. Every so often, I get a very intense pain in my legs that I'm just unable to deal with, to the point where I cannot stand or walk by myself. So I've been told that physically my legs are perfectly fine, which I knew, because my legs are actually the strongest part of my body, and they're perfectly fine. I can do everything until the pain sets in, and then suddenly I can't. So I need more tests to figure out exactly what would be going on. But it basically seems like I am having some nerve problems that might not even have to do with my legs, nerve problems from my back. My back is not completely straight and greatly affects my posture. I've been working really hard at trying to correct this, and my posture has actually greatly improved. But I'm still not completely straight, and it's noticeable. It's kind of frustrating because I've actually been told that I shouldn't own a horse because I don't know how to ride because my posture is very bad. My posture is not great, but it doesn't have anything to do with my ability to ride a horse. It's actually just that I do have a lot of problems with my back and my posture. And I've also been told this at the gym too. Sometimes people will think that I can't handle the weights that I'm using because my back's not straight, or my position and posture won't be straight. But it's like, no, I'm being able to do it. It's just I'm trying my best, and it's never really gonna be straight. So there's only so much that can be done about that. And that's basically the gist of my major medical problems. Some people think that it's not so bad, and I certainly understand that there are people that have it a lot worse than I do. But it's not a competition, and I think anyone thinking about getting a service dog, that's something important to remember, is that as long as that dog can physically help you make your life better, then you qualify. And there's no such thing as being more disabled or less disabled. It's just depends on what you need for your life. I'm sure people will watch this video and say that I don't really need a service dog, but nobody's opinion really matters here. The only opinions that matter are mine and my doctor's. I really hope that this video helps connect with somebody out there that is dealing with anxiety and depression. I think it is one of the hardest illnesses to live with because other people can't see it. and therefore they can't understand it. And it's easy to put a band-aid over something, but it's harder for people to understand that mental illness needs treatment the same way that a physical one does. The best advice I can give someone that is trying to find help is to find somebody that you can trust, that you can talk to. And it's not always going to be a family or friend, because sometimes they're not going to be open-minded enough to help you deal with this. And so that person might be a therapist. But also make sure it's somebody that you can trust, because not everybody in the medical profession is going to be able to help you. I was told by a psychiatrist that I was too successful to be depressed. Clearly that idiot shouldn't be practicing, but that kind of goes to show that you really have to find someone that is going to be willing to be understanding and help you, care about you, and not what, they think. And somebody who is trained enough in their profession to understand how wrong that psychiatrist was that told me that. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!